I shouldn't say struggling, I should say studying value and how to use it. So here is the slideshow, and I'm hoping that we're seeing something.
We're seeing that you've started screen sharing. Oh, there we go.
Can you see that?
Yep, there we are.
Yep.
Okay, let me see if okay. So learning to see value. And here we have an image by Lindsay Marshall. It's called When Fortune Flowers. And we have it in black and white and in color. And this is one of the images that Tommy Scanlon showed during her class. Her class was directed to fiber artists, especially tapestry weavers and quilters. So she said, if the value contrast is right in black and white, which you see on the left, it will work in color. So you can see distinctive shapes and even some perspective as terms of things that are closer might look darker and things that are in the background look lighter. Like imagine when you see photos of mountains, the mountains up front are darker and the mountains in the background and far away from you get lighter and lighter in color. Can you see my cursor too?
Yeah.
Okay. So what is value? Sarah Sweat, Bonnie and my hero, says that value is the relation of one part of a tapestry to another in respect to light and shade. This can mean that you are actually trying to portray depth and substance. I'll show you an example here in a second. Or you're just trying, imagine that you have a huge tapestry that is rather flat, but someone has to view it from a distance. And if you squint your eyes, if you don't have that contrast in value, all you might get is one kind of muddled color that you're looking at because there's not that contrast in your values. I'll show you what I mean in a second. So a watercolorist here, John Salmonen, says that value does all the work, but color gets all the credit. You may have heard that before. Elizabeth Buckley is a wonderful tapestry artist, and she says that she creates her initial designs in graphite or pencil. So she has all her shading in and everything, and then she worries about color. So without value contrast, a shape in your tapestry will not be distinguishable from adjacent shapes, whether you're close to it or further away. So here, looking again at Sarah Sweat's definition of value, value is the relation of one part of a tapestry to another in respect to light and shade. And you can see here, Heather Dunn has done a really lovely job of portraying this apple and getting the depth in there and the rounded shape of an apple and highlights. And she has done this, she did this in paper, the background is paper, and then the colored yarn is wool. But she, in her weft bundles, she was very careful in how she put those weft bundles together. And she has somewhat of a pure green over here, but you can see she mixed darker green, and then she mixed the green with the complementary color, which is red, and to make the shade or the shadow. So that was very effective use of different values of yarn. Chrissy Freeth is, she works on huge scale tapestries, but you can see in this picture, she doesn't have a lot of shading portrayed, except maybe around here in the bodice of the gowns. But she's done everything by paying attention to the different value contrast of her yarn. She's got medium yarns and light yarns. Oops, sorry. This is this is not where I wanted to be. Okay, so even though her design is very flat, you still get a lot of contrast in light and dark, and it's an effective design. This is interesting. Sarah Sweat, again, said that she was surprised. If you look at this little scarf that the person is knitting, the orange and blue, if you look at it in color, it works. But if you look at the black and white, there is no contrast between that orange and blue. And so it just looks rather flat. She could have done a little bit more, maybe with contrast of value to make it look like it had more dimension. That was kind of funny though, that even Sarah Sweat gets stuck sometimes. Okay, so in my learning to see value contrast, you can see one of my samples here. You know, dang, where'd my mountains go? There was not enough contrast in value between the sky and the mountains. So sky and mountains, and even between the foreground and the mountains. So that becomes pretty obvious if you look at a black and white photo. Everything's the same value. It's all kind of a light to medium light value. Here's another little surprise I got. So I was just woodling around and using up some little snippets of yarn. And when I looked at this, it was okay, but those fish heads here are awfully light, and they're the same value as the background, the pink background. So when you look at it here, or if you squinted your eyes, you wouldn't necessarily see any fish heads there because they're too close to the background. They probably should have been darker so they could provide a contrast between the background and the fish body. This one I was rather more pleased with. This is fireweed at the end of summer. So I didn't do any kind of value study with this. I just used the yarn I had. And I think as far as a pleasing contrast or pleasing proportion of contrast, I think I'm fairly pleased with that. I've got, medium value and dark value and lighter value. So that's getting a little better. And here again is Heather Dunn's apple, and you can see it in black and white. Even in black and white, that's very effective. But I was listening, I can't remember who it was. I think it was Jilly Edwards, had a online talk on Saturday, and I was listening to her, and she said when she went to school to be a fiber artist, and especially in, she was concentrating in tapestry, that students were actually encouraged to copy someone's work in order to learn what that person had done to be so effective with their final tapestry. I'm thinking about maybe doing that with this apple and just trying to really study and dig into what Heather was doing to get such a nice image.
Would you do the paper on top, or?
Oh, no, I'd probably try to replicate that with the wools I had. So I think I would just do it with probably at 8 EPI or ends per inch. And I would do a bundle of, I have some Weaver's Bazaar that's very thin, and I would probably bundle that together in 4. So 4 different colors. And then I would be able to kind of substitute out, up to 3 strands, substitute in a different color to get the subtlety that Heather has, or try to anyway. But I do like her idea of doing paper. And Sarah Sweat works a lot with coffee filters that she dyes and spins. So that's kind of, doesn't all have to be wool. Okay, so for my value study, these are the things that I used. I have my trusty camera, and I do have under the camera, I have a normal setting and then a black and white setting. So you need to be able to look at images through your phone camera with those two settings. I went and rated the Home Depot paint chip aisle and just got a lot of paint chips and went down the, you know how they have them arranged in vertical stripes and they go from dark to light. So I got good sample of several hues in all their tints and shades. I have a grayscale, and I'll show you a picture of that and my color wheel. But I use these two things more than I thought I would now. You need a glue stick, preferably cardstock. I learned the hard way that you do not want a cream colored cardstock to do these on. You want white. Scissors, and then color photo from a magazine or from one of your own magazine or photos, and then watercolors, and of course your yarn. So here is a grayscale, and you just basically put your sample on the on or behind this little cutout or on the gray. And then you kind of squint your eyes and see if that color is optically blending into the color on the grayscale, if that makes sense. When you squint, or when you take a photo of it in black and white with your camera, those colors will bleed in. And I'll show you a sample of that later on. And this is my little color wheel I use. And so let's look at some things that may or may not work. So these are some little poppies. I just did this with paint chips, and I probably, in the design itself, in the little mock-up, I didn't get enough value contrast either, which is one of the reasons that this is kind of not working. But I used Harrisville Highland and did little yarn wraps, and this is just a folded index card and some yarn wraps. Usually it's nice to get the proportion of the, you know, the proportions also correct. So I should have wrapped more yellow on here since that's a predominant color. But anyway, you can see we're trying out different color options. But when I look at my values in black and white, I don't see enough contrast here. I don't see enough contrast here. So all I'm going to get a really flat poppy, and I'm going to lose some of those colors if I'm looking at it from back further away. Some of those colors are going to bleed into each other, and then the shapes are going to be lost. So you just have to keep practicing, keep doing it. So this is an image I really like. I really want to weave fish someday. And I thought this might be something interesting to start with, to think about values. So in this picture, which you can see the black and white here, the values, there's not a wide range of values. There's mostly medium to dark values. There's a little bit of light in the rocks beneath the fish. But so what I would need to do if I were going to translate a portion of this into a tapestry is to use my artistic license and come up with a wider range of values. Go lighter and medium and darker. And especially if I want to make those green fish heads pop, I would have to change my values there. So working from a medium value out to a lighter value or a darker value is how I would think about this when choosing yarn colors and choosing yarns for a fish tapestry, if that makes sense. But this was kind of a good starting place to work with paint chips. So I got a whole gob of colors that represented the fish heads, substrate that the fish were on, and also pinks of the fish. So just grab a good spectrum of value from light to dark, and don't worry too much about what you're doing. You're training, with this exercise, you're training your eye to see those differences in value and how they provide depth and shape to your tapestry. Okay, so this is my grayscale. This is kind of what I was talking about. You can lay the paint chips next to the grayscale and kind of squint your eyes. And if the paint chips and the grayscale kind of blend together, then you've made a good choice with where your paint chip was placed. There used to be something called a quilter's ruby beholder. I understand they now have like ruby plexiglass glasses that you can look at and see what the values are in like a landscape, that if you have your glasses in a landscape that you're looking at. And that would also help you to sort, if you had glasses like that, for your paint chip grayscale exercise. So again, we're just roughly sorting them according to the instinct, your instincts. And then we're going to take your camera and set it to black and white and take a photo of your placement of your paint chips. So you can see here, the middle here probably should have been moved up one darker. But anyway, rearrange if you need it, if you need to. And then what I did was take my very white paper and cut out my paint chips and arrange them according to value. So here you go from light through medium to dark. And again, this is helping you see value. It's not necessarily designed for tapestry or anything. It's helping you see value. And then you could go to your yarns and match your yarns to each of these paint chip colors. And that will help you learn where these are placed. Like this seems like it would be a darker color to me. It seems like it would be up here, maybe better placed. And this one that looks very light to my eye, and I would have placed it here, you can see where it falls. So this is an interesting little exercise to do here. So as we said before, the American Tapestry Alliance is a really good reference source and source of information. And one of the things I found there was an article by Becky Stevens on value. And she spoke about using watercolor paints. I have not tried this yet, but I really think that this seems like an appealing way to design your tapestry. So Joan Baxter, who, if you don't know who Joan Baxter is, you need to look her up. She's a Scottish Joan Baxter. So she suggested that you paint your yarns, working from the yarns that you have on hand or from a yarn color chart. Mix your paint as close to the sample as possible. So you're mixing your watercolor paint to match your yarn. This gives you a true sense of the value and temperature of the color your yarns will produce. And if it looks good in your painted sketch, when you weave something, you probably won't be disappointed in the final image. And this is kind of along the lines of Elizabeth Buckley too. She designs her tapestries in graphite or pencil. So everything is black and white and shades of gray. And so she adds the color later. Now, I found this interesting that different lines of tapestry yarn, they're very different in what kind of value contrasts they provide between their tints and shades of a particular hue. So as you can see, this is just the color photo of a yarn called Epic, which is it's a yarn made in Portugal, but is sold through I believe Timeless Treasures here in the US. So you can see they're all kind of just medium values. And so you probably, if you bought a range of Epic, you know, you may or may not get all of the value contrast you need for one tapestry. And then here's Harrisville Highland, Harrisville Shetland. So you can see here that they really don't have a lot of light values here. And this is the yarn that we were using in class. And I love it. It's a lovely yarn, but it just maybe doesn't have, it wouldn't have the subtlety that some of the other yarn lines have. And also these are probably better used at, the Highland is good at probably 8 ends per inch. I've used one strand of Shetland at 10 EPI. So there's not a whole lot of room for bundling your colors here and making different options in color or value. So that's something to think about. Yep.
I have a question. When you say bundle, are you saying respin it, reply it, or?
No, what I mean by that is when you have a yarn that's thin enough to use as weft, you can bundle it or put several strands together and hold them together as you weave. You do not have to respin them together. It's enough just to hold them together, and depending on the effect that you want, you either can place them as they fall. Let's say you have 2 strands of blue, sky blue, a dark strand of blue, and a strand of orange, and you hold all of those together as you are weaving. You may want that orange to be a little bit more subtle. In that case, I would kind of twist those yarns together as I'm placing my weft.
Okay.
If I didn't care, and if I kind of wanted the serendipity of where that orange was going to fall, maybe sometimes it was more prevalent, sometimes it was more subtle, I would just hold those yarns together and just lay them in the shed and close the shed and beat. And they would pretty much kind of just create color where they were. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So what I have done is gotten a whole bunch of color cards, which is fun. And they usually aren't very expensive. And Weaver's Bazaar in Harrisville do not charge shipping on those. So you can get color cards and just kind of see what each company, what the yarns are like. If, you know, here in Alaska, I know there's a Far North Fibers in Anchorage, and she has some yarns, but we don't have, and here in Fairbanks, we have a Weaver's yarn, and Susan has some limited colors of Harrisville, but we don't, overall, we don't have a whole lot of yarns available to us here. And unless you spin your own, you know, since you are spending such a long time on a particular weaving project, because that is the nature of tapestry, you might want to order some of the color cards. Not only is it's fun to see all of the the yarns, but you can also kind of gauge, is this going to provide, is this yarn line going to provide me with enough value contrast, or am I going to have to combine yarn lines, or am I going to have to spin my own? So this is Weaver's Bazaar from the UK. And when I look at this on the black and white version, I see a lot of medium and lights.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that's going to influence your value or how you perceive these colors and values is going to be the luster or the surface of the yarn. Harrisville Highland and Harrisville Shetland are woolen spun yarns, which means they have a very matte surface. They are not reflecting a lot of light. So those are going to have a very different look to them when they're woven than these Weaver's Bazaar yarns would have. These are mostly long wools, and they are pretty lustrous. They are shiny and they reflect the light really nicely, and they're smooth yarns. So that fuzziness isn't there to also trap the light. Okay, so one of the interesting things I'm going to be playing with here is the Weaver's Bazaar graphite gradient. Here is the gradient here, and then I also got black and white. So I was going to try to maybe weave some things in that, and the apple is, I'm thinking, might be an interesting exercise to do in that.
I think that doing that apple sounds really, that sounds great. That sounds like a fun project.
Yeah, and you know, I don't think it's cheating. I mean, the great masters, Rembrandt had his apprentices copy his work so that he could be sure that they knew how to help him in the studio. I think it really is, if you're doing it with the intention of learning and really digging in, studying how to do it, I think it's a great idea to do that. I like that idea.
I've been told that when you go to fine art school, certain fine art schools, that not only do they teach you to copy masters, but they tell you to dress of the era of that master and go and sit in the gallery, so you get totally into the context of, you know, the painting. Yeah, pretty interesting.
Yeah. Let's see. So I just still show you a couple of my latest ones here. This is my little fox. It's still on my loom. I'm still working on it. I'd like to do some shaped work with this, but anyway, there she is.
Adorable.
So if you look at this color picture and then you look at the black and white, I don't know. I think it provides a little depth. I like the little the blending down here. I used Harrisville Shetland. So I actually did unply that and used one ply of green and one ply of brown over here. And then this was all green and this was brown. So that is another way you could weft bundle, is actually, yes, unply your thicker yarns. And you end up with a kind of a marled effect with the fewer strands of yarn that you have in your weft bundle, the more dotted or pointillist it will look, because you're not optically blending with 3 or 4 strands. So it'll look a little bit, I don't know.
Yeah, I love it.
Pardon?
I love it.
Yeah, thank you. So you notice that there were some little yellow sunset things up here. You can't see it there. I needed to do some more contrasting value there. So probably a lighter yellow would have worked. Let's see, this is a little sample. I was trying to work on wedge weave to see what the slits of wedge weave would do when you wove with them. And then I also tried to make it into a value contrast. So this one surprised me a little bit. I didn't think that the pink would be so much darker than the adjacent little thing, but I like the range. You have a medium to light and very dark. So I think if you stood back from this one, you could see what was going on. You could see the geese here, the geese would not get lost in the sky. And then, okay, so I wanted to do something bigger, and this is not too much bigger, but I wondered if this worked. So this is the Richardson Highway in fall. So this is the Alaska Range. And I think I did a lot better than my my mountains that you saw at first, but I probably could have made these mountains lighter or the sky lighter so that there was more of a perception of depth from here going back to the mountains. But when you look at it in black and white, it's not that bad, except I still probably should have made the sky a little bit lighter, but I like it.
I think it's great the way it is.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then, so I guess about the last thing I have, I was thinking about organizing, or if it would be a good idea or not to organize my Weaver's Bazaar by value instead of by color. Because right now I have them all, you know, all the teals and all the blues and everything together. But I wonder if I put them in a bin by value, if that will make me think more about what I choose. And I'm still going to be doing grayscale and color wheel and definitely making samples. So these are just some of the references that I used for this PowerPoint. Sarah Sweat, of course, is wonderful. Please do copy down this date and then or go to a field guide to needlework, her website, and type in value. And this article is an excellent treatment of how to think about value. So I highly recommend that. And then Becky Stevens, value and color temperature. This is also interesting. I mean, there's color temperatures is a whole other thing you could get lost in and study for a long time. The interview, or Elizabeth Buckley was talking about her process of designing in an interview that I saw in for Wild Rice Retreat. She's teaching there, I believe, next summer or next September. So she'll be teaching. And then Tommy Scanlon had her designing for Tapestry class via Zoom, John C. Campbell Folk School. So that is what I have. And if you have any comments or questions.
Oh, I have a question. Going back to the fox.
Yep.
You were talking about the sky, and that, if I understand it, you didn't feel you had distinguished enough of the differences in colors. But what I try to achieve, and I don't know if I did or not, in my sky was not so much that you could see all the different colors, but that the sky was broken up. And somehow I took in, your brain took in the fact that it wasn't a solid mass, which I like also, but I didn't want that there. So there are times, I think, when the values being close together works for you, if that's what you intend, right?
Right. Okay. But I think what I was going for is more of a, see, even if I look over here, I can't really see that little bit of yellow. But
Okay.
I think you were referring to the mountains in that sky. That sky is basically one value, but it is very broken up, and it provides more of a kind of a visual energy than if
Yes.
it was just a flat sky.
Right.
So I think, yeah, I think you're right.
Okay. That's one of the differences between Tapestry and Navajo. Navajo is going to be flat. There's no question it's going to be flat, and that's fine. It's beautiful that way. And I know I ran into trouble with the value because my red and my gray fight each other. And so after I finished that part, which was the wings, I said, I will never let the two of them get together again. I'm keeping them separated.
Were they just visually fighting, or? Oh, yeah.
Here, that's the difference. And the green, I totally lost. And yet the green was before it got entangled with the gray. It was interesting.
Hello.
Jen, we can't hear you when your face is turned toward your tapestry. Your speaker's not picking it up.
Oh, okay. So what I was saying was, I don't know if you can see it, the red and the gray don't go together here. And visually they bother me. So that's why I made sure afterwards I wanted the red, but they wouldn't touch. They wouldn't go near each other. And I guess because they're the same value, I'm assuming they're close in value.
Yeah. So what you're saying, do you have a green line there?
Yes, and the green line is almost completely off. When I had the two colors, side by side away from this, they seemed fine. They were very, but once I put the green line in, it got lost.
Yeah, so I think that green is about the same value as the gray, and that's why it's getting lost. There's also something called simultaneous contrast. I wonder, that's probably not what's going on between the red and its complement green.
Huh.
So
Okay.
there's a lot to learn.
And instinctively, I said, don't let the two get together again.
So does anybody else have any kind of tricks that they use to design or play with their yarns, or?
When I've taken a few classes over the years, you mentioned about the ruby glasses and things. They were just simply using a red piece of plastic. I have something called project folders, and it's they're like, you can slide a project in, they're plastic, but they're relatively clear. And you just put that over things, and it really helps bring out the values, whether it's a photo or fabric or other things. And it's just a piece of red plastic.
Oh, that's a great idea. I'll have to go and see if my daughter has a piece of a folder.
The other thing that I once took a watercolor class from Gail Murakami. And one of the things that she does when determining values, she'll just make a value sketch when looking at mountains or something. And there's this very specific group of pens she used that are at, I believe, Michael's. And they are all in grays, and they're like 10%, 20%, 30%, etc. Or maybe they're 20, 40, 60 or whatever. But you can get them in a range, and then you can use them when you're doing your sketch, when you're looking at something, to indicate it's really dark or really light.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I love what you said about watercolors, Mina. Just sometimes for me, I get a lot of my inspiration from stuff outdoors, like a lot of us do in Alaska. And so I'm perpetually taking photographs of things and then realizing as soon as I get them home that they don't work. And so I've got, I don't know if I can get this in the camera.
Yep.
There we go. So
Can
this
see that.
is, there are two things that I did, and I am not a trained artist, obviously, but there are two things that I did in taking this photograph. It's a couple of Bohemian waxwings, and there's the original photograph, and all of the values are fairly similar with the possible exception of the shape of one bird's beak across the other bird. And in translating it into paint, I wanted to emphasize the bird beak because I thought that was the most interesting thing about it, but also just really accentuate the values. And I cheated a little bit by bringing a little halo around each of the birds, which I'm going to do with hatching when I actually weave. So I think that was an aha for me. And because I'm not an artist, it took a moment of saying, I don't care what the cartoon looks like. And you know, nobody's going to see it but me anyway. But that translation from photograph or from what my eye saw to paint and then into the yarn really has helped a lot.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who do tapestry weaving also draw. And like Bonnie said, it can just be for you. You don't have to show anybody, you're not getting graded on it, but it really helps you see things. It really helps you look and understand what you're seeing. So I draw a lot and try to draw my ideas, but I think that's a practice goes well hand in hand with tapestry weaving. Does anybody else have any other things that they've been working on or other interesting?
Well, I don't have anything I've been working on, but I just wanted to say that I really appreciate you talking about the value and contrast of colors, because I'm so new. I've just thought about what colors I want to put into my tapestry, not about the value of that color. I mean, you're making it so important. Now I know how important it is. So thank you.
No,
I'm really
you're
going
welcome.
to, I have another tapestry in mind and I'm planning it. It's an animal, but now instead of just thinking of, oh, it's going to be brown and tan and white, I'm going to look at the different yarns. What kind of brown do I need? What kind of tan do I need? But that's a challenge for us up here in Alaska because we can't go to a store and say, oh, this is the color I want.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Right.
It makes it more of a challenge for us.
Right. Definitely.
Yeah.
And
so, yeah.
yeah. When I do get, I can make my own color cards too. So I have a little sample of all the yarns that I've used in the past. And I think when you should think about that because it just keeps them in your mind and it does let you go back and say, oh, that brown would be pretty cool. Or it lets you go back and grab what you need.
Yeah, because you know, at a weaver's yarn, there is a very limited amount of colors. And I think the last time I went in there, which was a couple weeks ago, I literally bought out most of her yarn. Sorry, everyone. I mean, I just needed certain colors, and I bought as much as of them I could get. So she said she was going to order more, and I plan on going back. But I'm going to have to order from someone else, probably the Eugene place or something.
Yeah.
It's just so hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just to get a variety of colors and then to be able to look at the values.
So if you spin at all,
I don't.
but you can swirl the things together and you just get like unspun rolags. You can create any color you want to create just by using basic color mixing theory, and you can change the value of it by adding a little bit of black. You can lower the value by adding a little bit of white or a little bit of light brown, and you can absolutely create any color on earth that you want just by having a few basic colors. They're not spun, and then you card them together. But you can just roll them even if you don't spin.
Well, you can
Anyway,
get undyed stains.
Really
too.
solves your color problem.
Does. Well, I have an example
Something to
here
think about.
too. Jen had brought up the fact that, you know, until you learn to spin, and we'll suck you into that too, don't worry.
You will.
But until you learn to spin, you can actually unply yarn. And this is, that is weft bundling with Harrisville Highland. So I love Harrisville Highland. I spin too, but I just love the kind of heathered look of it. The fact that their dye process, the dye takes into the fiber unevenly. I love that. So I actually use the fishing swivel technique. And so what you do is you tie a fishing swivel to the back of a chair or post. You tie your yarn onto the fishing swivel, and the swivel goes, you know, while you unply the yarn. So you unply it just like you would for a splice, but from one end, and as you wrap it around both hands like this, and it just goes and opens right up and doesn't get tangled, and you can put two pieces together like that. I don't know that that's something I'd recommend for a huge tapestry. It's a little bit of a pain in the tail, but for playing with color, if you've got some really light and some really dark and a couple things in between, it's a good way to see what happens when you put a light strand with a dark strand, and kind of start to play with weft bundling a little bit that way.
Yeah, I will.
I want
Thank you, guys.
to say thank you for letting me join you. And my comment is this is worthy of a guild meeting. No, really, because it applies no matter whether you're knitting or crocheting or spinning or weaving. If you're trying to just weave a piece of fabric, that value difference, I've never thought much about it, but I can see how it would make a difference. And I think this is worthy of using it for a guild presentation someday.
Yeah,
But thank you for letting me join.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've learned a lot today, so thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for joining us.
So we had said that we were going to try to keep these to an hour so they don't become completely overwhelming.
Okay.
Does anybody have something that they really want to show and get some feedback on before we stop?
Are we going to do more of these, you think?
Yes, I actually put a tentative date that I wanted to check with everybody on the calendar of May 23rd as being a Sunday afternoon, about a month from now, for a next meeting. Does that kind of sound?
Sounds great.
Sounds great.
Okay. And does this format work where somebody presents at the start and then we can open up into a conversation?
Yep.
Yeah, as long as it's not me. Just kidding. I will present someday.
Fair enough. Well, if anybody does want to present or has some topic ideas, just email me or Nina or Mina, and we'll put together. Mina, would you be willing to share your slide deck?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Well, I'll send out. Oh, I actually hit record as soon as I realized that people might have to leave early. So I'll send out the recording, Mina's deck, a picture of Lucy. And if there's anything else that folks want, just let us know and we'll include that in the notes, and we'll see you all in a month on May 23rd.
Great.
Awesome.
I have an idea, so I'm going to send it on to you in case you guys can put it together. I can't. I don't know enough. But, you know, if you guys can, you know everything.
Oh, and I just had one other thing. If anybody hears of any good workshops coming up, please let me know, because I'm really wanting to join something. Maybe not over the warm summer, but, you know, in the fall or anything. So.
Fantastic. We'll definitely keep you posted.
Okay. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Great.
See ya.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Thank you
This was a
again,
lot
Nina.
of fun. It's great
Yeah,
to
it was
talk
great.
tapestry.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye. Okay. Mina, that was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fun to put together. kind of made me think of even more about that. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's kind
Yeah.
of one of those endless topics.
yeah, yeah. It's like, okay, maybe I'll just practice for the rest of my life.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I am going to stop